Okay, so we have a panel discussion right now with all the speakers who are still present here, and we have the sessions until 5:30, so roughly around 40 minutes or so. Any questions from the audience? We cover a vast range of projects, some local experience and some. Yes, now, yes, please. Maybe you could actually introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Eliane Schreuder. I'm from the Netherlands, researcher at TNO. I have a question for James Gross, because I wondered, especially when I saw the open office space with the basketball court inside, I wondered, what about noise? Is it an issue at all? And is it dealt with as, on the same level as daylight in the design process or differently?
So,
is it on?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm not quite sure what you mean, but the design idea for having the basketball court was that in providing an environment that enabled people to energize, then they could choose to do that whenever they like. So that court, it's actually a multi-court. You can play badminton, a whole range of things on that court, and there's no rule about when you do it. We placed it underneath the entrance bridge, so you have to walk across. A visitor to the building walks across a bridge and looks down at that court, and then goes to the reception desk, because it talks about the values of that organisation. That first of all, it gives permission to people to bring exercise and health to their workplace. It gives permission to do it whenever they like, and it talks about wellness as a sort of embedded value of the organisation. Yes, it's noisy, but our view about noise in buildings is that everyone gets paranoid about noise, when in fact noise is something that as humans in a community we actually need. So the noise levels in most of the buildings that we design are higher than most engineers, for example, might like it to be. And that is because we believe that, like we believe that 21.5 or 22.5 or whatever the temperature is, that's set around the world as a comfort level, can range from, say, 20 degrees to 25 degrees. That variability in buildings is incredibly important to energise people and to not bring a standard environment to every building around the world. Is it like daylighting? I'm not sure. I think, have I answered that question? Well, you didn't mention noise at all. No, I just talked about noise then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, noises, yeah. We think there should be more noise in buildings than less.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you talk about home, at my home, it's very quiet, because everybody's working all the time, even out of work.
Your home is quiet?
Yeah. Okay, any more questions? Yeah. Your question over there? No? I can't see very well from here. Yes, the other side?
Yeah, my name is William from Architectural Services Department. I have a question. When I listened to Dr. David Lung's comment about what makes a hospital's bad, say, for example, overcrowding, poor ventilations, something like that. And it almost seems that Hong Kong hospitals almost fall into those categories. Because maybe it is because of the high density environment in Hong Kong, and also because we are always air conditioning everywhere within the building, like a hospital. So my question is it possible for Hong Kong, say, for example, to adopt natural ventilation, not for the whole hospital, but at least part of the hospital? Is it possible And then I like to deliver my questions to Dr. Libby Lee or maybe Alice Young, saying anything, is it, to their view, is it a possibility? Because as Dr. Long say, to my surprise, for natural ventilation, it can achieve 60 air change for an hour. And it is really difficult if you want to achieve that amount by purely mechanical means. Thank you.
Well, both Dr. Lee and Dr. Long are not here at the present moment, but maybe I could leave the answer to the platform panelists, and whether you have any views on that. But just a bit of background, in Hong Kong, in the 80s, the government policy is that hospitals should not have air conditioning. Yeah, so it's only in the 90s that that the government thought that we got to be a little bit more civilized because Hong Kong's environment is getting hotter and hotter and more congested. And so we start to have, as a matter of policy, to have hospitals fully air conditioned. And that's why even at the present moment, if you look at the Hong Kong Planning Standard Guidelines, hospitals are still supposed to be located up on the hill, with good ventilation. It's still the standard. But currently, in terms of town planning, most of the hospitals are emphasis is more put on accessibility, convenience for patient access, and that sort of thing. So it's changed in 20 years. But anyway, that's the background. But what's your view on on that particular point? Any view? Green or whatever?
I suppose natural ventilation could be adopted in hospitals, but not for areas whereby you need to control the environment, and also in terms of controlling air pressure, because a lot of spaces within the hospital, you actually need to maintain a differential pressure between spaces, right? So with natural ventilation, you cannot do that. But I think in areas like in the main lobby, yeah, why not? Why not use natural ventilation? Because if you in the summer months, perhaps it's not comfortable for people. But during the intermediate months and also during winter months, I think natural ventilation is possible, and also I think quite acceptable in terms of maintaining the indoor environment. One thing is quite a concern is the outdoor air quality, whether it's suitable or not. Because in Hong Kong, the outdoor air quality at times, is not that acceptable, if you like, or desirable for natural ventilation purposes. So yeah, I cannot see why not. But obviously, you've got to maintain a certain control, if you like.
Our friends from Sing Health, Singapore. Yes, we just toured Ng Fang Hospital last week. Class B2 and Class C, naturally ventilated. It was so windy, they have to find a way to weight the curtains down. So short answer, possible. But you have to place the patient room in such a way that it encourages airflow.
I would take this question into two dimensions. First of all, I think you're talking about saving energies. That's the prime objective, I suppose. In Hong Kong, we have a very special condition that we are very densely populated. Our air quality does not, our ambient one may not necessarily to be a very clean one, depends where you're located. And sometimes we have insects. And if you start looking all this into hospital conditions, I think even though you want to do a natural ventilation design, you have to be mechanically controlled natural ventilation design. So that in such a way that you control when all the window will be open, all the window will be closed. And you cannot leave it to the individuals. Now, because I have another theory that human, we don't listen, we don't obey all laws. Okay? If you look at all around the places, people just do not switch off lightings. Does not switch off air conditionings. So if you create a design that you just allow the user to use it, they will abuse it. Now, so so that you will actually counterproductive. You're actually spending more and more energy instead of less energy. So you see what I mean. So I think Hong Kong, we could design during a certain period of time, natural ventilation. But those designs have to be mechanically controlled. Otherwise, it's not going to work, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think the other aspect that Dr. Long also mentioned is the mold growth, right? I mean, if you are not in a controlled environment, natural ventilation may not reach every corner of the room. So under a very humid condition in Hong Kong, if you have a stagnant area, then I mean that will encourage mold growth. And in a hospital environment, I don't think that's desirable as well.
Okay, I can offer another piece of experience that for you from two. It's actually based on clinical experience. First of all, during SARS, when Dr. Long mentioned about all these isolation facilities and all that's set up and built up in Hong Kong, all these were taking place after SARS. At SARS period, when we were first hit, that was 12 years ago, we had no isolation facilities in our hospitals. Ventilation systems were very sort of outdated, yeah. And so what we did at that time was actually, in order to combat the infections and all that, we opened up all the windows, yeah. So that was the time when all the windows were open. But that was also a time when, except for SARS patient, we had no other patients, because all the other patients somehow, dare not go into the hospital, right? So that was simple, yeah. So we opened up all the windows. So that's one piece of experience. But the other piece of experience is, apart from this issue in relation to, for example, outdoor air quality, the total outside environment is getting more and more heated in Hong Kong, all these other factors. We also feel that, sometimes it's very difficult, because what the staff feels in terms of temperature, environment, desirable working environment is very different from what the patient feels. I'm not talking about energy efficiency, I'm not talking about green and that sort of thing, yeah. And especially with a lot of aging population, the sense of temperature and everything is very different from the staff who's working all the time. And this is something that we have to strike the balance. And I found that, leaving it open without air conditioning system is very difficult to control. I don't know what's your view on that. Some of the other experts' view on that. Yeah, James?
I think this is a very interesting conversation, because in Australia we have very extreme weather as well. But a particular project we've been working on lately is, as a result of wanting to use areas of the building in natural ventilation or in mixed mode. I mean, I think, let's get the terminology right. It's never natural ventilation. It's mixed mode, so it gives you the option. But it means you can actually think about a building slightly differently, that you can have what we might call an interstitial space, a space between inside and outside, which is actually not air-conditioned at all. And by using the sun properly, you can heat and shade it over various times of day. But it means that the building almost becomes an air-conditioned core within public areas which are more like an interstitial space. So you can actually think about designing buildings slightly differently if you take the view that air is an important quality, and get layers of space and layers of different use, which means you can then introduce gardens inside buildings, because they are actually part of the sort of natural phenomenon that you're introducing into enclosed or semi-enclosed spaces. The other thing about climates like this, again, that we have say in the northern parts of Australia, where you can have a seamless public realm, so that you can bring the definition between a private realm and a public realm, say in a hospital, a gallery, which might be the reception area or the waiting area or so on, then you can break down that physicality of separation from the public realm into the private realm, and gardens can sort of move between those spaces and so on. So I think what this subject offers is another way of thinking about how to make buildings, rather than just saying wards cannot be air-conditioned and other things must be, or whatever. It's an opportunity to rethink the way that we make some of these buildings.
Actually, on this, I write on to James' sort of suggestions of gardens in between institutional and public realms. In fact, what we are building actually at the moment, some of our community hall, we try to promote natural ventilations in those communal areas, in between the indoor and outdoor. I think this is quite encouraging as well, because then actually the user using the building can have a sense of air or the real life, rather than going into a fridge like what we are having now in Hong Kong.
Okay, yes, Simon?
Maybe I talked about other buildings that we were building, or we have finished several buildings. It's all right?
Yeah.
It is an office building, another public building without air conditioning. So we have this experience of designing several buildings in Science Park, which some office building can be do without air conditioning for a certain part of the year to require total free cooling. And the ventilated atrium I talked about briefly in my presentation is the concept of utilizing natural chimney effect to draw in cool air from outside. Now, if you've been to the atrium of the University of Science and Technology, it's a huge atrium, but it's not air conditioned. Nobody feels warm even in the hottest summer day. I think the idea is that we have a glazed roof on top of an atrium. As I said, sunlight shining through the skylight and penetrate into the interior has to pass through two pieces of glass. And they can only pass through one piece, and they cannot get into the interior of the rooms. It might be difficult to explain, but it's something like a greenhouse, I said. It's like a greenhouse where the sunlight get into the greenhouse, cannot get out. So it's being trapped in the atrium. And the trick is that when the air the glass, the skylight glass gets heated up, it creates a high temperature zone as much as 50 degrees Celsius. And it draws up air to the roof. And if we allow those hot air to escape sideways, and we'll keep on drawing up cold air into the room. So it generates a sort of current. And as you've been to Science Park, building number 20, and it's also had a big atrium, which is not air conditioned. And we utilize the same effect as a sort of double glazing, with one pane of glass on the roof and one pane of glass on the wall. So sun has to shine through the first glass and cannot get into the second glass. So the interior, all rooms facing the atrium will have cool lighting. Mm-hmm. And it helps to cool the very large open space without air conditioning. And in many offices in the Science Park, a new building, phase 4, we designed that a certain part of the year air conditioning is not needed, because we have a set of movable panels as a double facade. The panel can be rotated. Rotated either this way, closing the window, or open. So it depends on the weather. We can control the temperature inside, and we have devices to bring in fresh air into the interior because of the funnel effect that will draw up the air upwards. So we are working on this aspect, and maybe we can apply this to hospital design in the future. But for the time being, we are working on a very stringent climate control for prevention for fungi or molds growing, and for comfort and for clean air and for pressurization and so on. And I think in the future we will be aiming at designing hospitals that that will eliminate at least part of the air conditioning requirements.
Yeah. Yes.
It's a very simple question, but I'd like to ask it, how does the podium think about standardization in terms of hospital building? Why I'm asking this, from the European point of view, we have a lot of problem to keep the quality of our health systems. That means economics is a terrific issue. That means, and the fantastic presentation showed me, on the one side, you have all these challenges in terms of, let's call it privacy or house system, what we spoke about. On the other side, you have all these technical requirements and logistic requirements. All these issues increase prices. I'm sorry, normally I don't like to speak about economics, but it's a very important issue, and my main question is standardization in hospital building, how you feel about that?
So the question is on standardizations in hospital building, having considered all these different demands, conflicting demands, trade-offs, and that sort of thing. Anyone want to respond first? Yes? Victor.
Yeah, I think standardization, there is a trend, I think, in currently to look into standardization of operating theaters, right? Because, basically, if you go in the operating theaters, if you don't have, basically the operation is very similar. But, if you go into different hospitals, operating theaters will have different arrangements. So I understand there is some discussion about this kind of approach to have a standardization on operating theaters. So that you go into operating theater, the doctor and nurses know where the things are put, and basically the operation is the same. Yeah. But in other aspects, I don't know, maybe you will answer?
We do a lot of research, so research does help, but for us it's very simple. In the US, we have to follow Joint Commission guidelines. If you don't follow the guidelines, you cannot open the hospital. There's no choice. And the guidelines will tell you basic requirements of sterilization, airflow, relationship of different blocks. And on top of that, for healthcare planner, we have additional exams. So we're architects first, and then after that, we can take more exams. I'm a member of the ACHA, American College of Healthcare Architects. So there's a different level of certification. But to do that, you got to understand basic hospital requirements. Joint Commission, Facility Guidelines Institute, Australia have their own guidelines. UK have their own guidelines. Singapore is trying to develop their own guidelines. SingHealth again. Where else do we have guidelines? Usually it's just Australia. Japan. Japan has their own. So the major guidelines are Joint Commission, which evolved into JCI, Joint Commission International. Singapore is using it. Hong Kong is using Australian guidelines. I'm just repeating myself.
Well, I think, as we know, modulation and prefabrication has sort of obsessed architects since the beginning of the modern movement. I think, however, putting things like infection control, all those very difficult things that have to be coordinated in hospitals, I think an interesting topic is really how limiting is the building industry or the construction industry on the provision of buildings, whether it be hospitals or whatever building type. And now we know that we can print things. And we can print in metal, we can print in wood fibre, and if we can print buildings, does that help solve the problem of the economics of buildings, especially hospitals? Can we print our way out of this issue, in other words? rather than think about the standard way of prefabrication, which is really still using the conventional building methodologies, putting them on a truck or a train or a plane or a boat and erecting them somewhere else. But if we can do things on site and think cleverly about that, then maybe it's the building industry which actually has to change. And I think that's decades away, really, because of the power and political power that big construction companies have.
My profession is a contractor. I build buildings. I also owned some of the largest prefabrication plants in China. So basically, Hong Kong, the way I look at construction project is already an assembly plant. So in order to win a project, we must design the hospital in a modular construction manner as much as we possibly could, because Hong Kong will have extremely high labor costs. I'm paying something like between $2,500 Hong Kong per day for a steel bender, which is about $400 per day. Okay, so our labor cost is extremely high. So one of the beauty about design and build is for the contractor like myself, to be able to bring in a lot of prefabrication idea, modular construction idea into the project itself. So basically, a lot of things are designed in Hong Kong, but we'll take it down into component, and then manufacture in China, ship it into Hong Kong, and then assemble on site. This is already happening. And this way will be able for us to lower our costs. But of course, 3D printing is around the corner. How that going to transform the industry, I think that's we are still having a very open mind about that. But I think what Yutin is describing is already happening in Hong Kong because of our cost issue.
Is that addressing your question? Yeah. But I think one of the biggest challenges to standardization is not so much on the design building side. It's really on the doctors, nurses, and all these people. Because all the doctors think that they're different. The neurosurgeons think that they have special requirement, which is very different from the cardiac surgeons. Yeah, and they always think that while they may be right, the orthopedic surgeons are the most worst people in the world. That kind of mindset. So Angela, you've been talking to end users all the time. So that's actually a big obstacle to standardization. So what do you think of that?
We do design standardized, for example, OT.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes we do over-design. Okay, so for example, you're talking about operating theater. Typically, other than hybrid OR or IMRI, we have two sizes. One is general, for general surgery. We call it big and small. General surgery suite, and then the largest suite are for exactly what you mentioned, cardiac and ortho. Okay.
Yeah.
So when you go into cardiac OT, it looks exactly like the ortho OT. It has to be. We cannot label, well, we kind of do label them, but at the end, we cannot just say this is only for cardiac and this is only for ortho. So we standardize two sizes of OT, except again for cath lab, all the newest toys.
Yep.
Susie.
Yes, question at the back. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Kate. I'm from the Netherlands. I want to thank all the speakers today. Really interesting conversation and discussion. We went from, the 7 clusters of Hong Kong to discussing a little bit about holistic care and the future of maybe bedless, even hospitals here. We discussed place, accessibility, the impact that green has on the workforce and everything like that. But I'm curious to know, in your role, especially in this research that we're adding, what is the role of the user or the patient throughout this entire process? And what is the role, of the patient in the outcomes as well?
That's a very good question. Patient's role. Yeah?
Patients are part of our user group.
Yeah.
So when we have user group meeting, we have the users, nurses, and doctors. We have a separate set of user group meeting called town hall meeting. Okay, and we also do focus group. But that depends on the client. The client has to agree to it. They might say we don't want that, but part of our suggestion is town hall could be as big as this. We accept question. or again, user group. That is especially important when we are designing cancer hospital and children's hospital. Children's hospital, we make observation. Cancer hospital, we do talk to the patient.
Yeah.
It's not new, we've been doing that.
Yeah. Calvin.
In terms of accessibility, we have the same common approach with Angela. We heavily involved the user group, and actually some of them is here today. Neil is here today. Hi, Neil. And we do extensively researches with wheelchair users, with people with hearing impairment, people with dementia, people with visual impairment. And we do never do anything without them. And in fact, accessibility without involving the user group is meaningless, if you ask me. So I think most of you will agree to that. So yes, to answer your question, user group is actually part of what we are about. If there's no user groups, they don't need us at all. Correct, Angel? Yeah. There's one more question at the back. Yeah.
No, I want to continue to ask Angela on this particular elaborate. You mentioned about like involving users in doing mock-up simulations, walking through the sort of lean process and so on, all that. Have you involved patients in actually walking through the patient care process, patient journey?
Yes, sometimes it was intentionally we want to improve our design, others are for PR. Mm-hmm. That's also very client-driven. Some of our clients wants to project that image and say they reach out to the community. So they do that. And I think in one of the Singapore hospitals, they actually have the mock-up in the lobby. Mm-hmm. So public can actually go and touch and feel and play with that mock-up too.
Yeah. And then?
This will be a tough one.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not tough. I'm Susie from Oricon. So appreciate the conversation today. It's been a fantastic insight into the Hong Kong world. So thank you. One thing I would like to hear a little more about is the role of technology and digital innovation ahead in Hong Kong. And I suppose I'm reflecting on the story we began with about the pressure on the health system here through the ageing population and what that will do in terms of your need to increase your capacity, but also the pressure on your costs. We've been doing research in Australia recently, addressing the same kinds of issues with our clients and asking them what they see is the big issues that they face ahead and what they see as solutions. And a big thread of conversation that comes through is around technology and digital innovation in how we can, reduce the load on the health system through wellness, preventative care, and how we can keep the demand off our hospitals through more treatment, more care outside of the hospital, and then increasing the efficiency and optimising our hospitals themselves. So I just open to the panel for conversation, I guess particularly around Hong Kong and how that conversation has been reflected here. Does that make sense?
I'm not sure we have the answer. I can only speak for most of what we do in the US, if I may just have 30 seconds of speech. And I'm quoting you, Susie, because when we design hospital, we say we build in flexibility. Extra space, corridor, all that, you've heard it before. And I agree with you 100%. Nowadays, flexibility is on the technology side. More important because we cannot keep up with renovation, but technology changes every year. So we have to prepare for new technology to have the hospital as flexible as possible. So that's one, that's in Hong Kong. In the region, what we're seeing is actually even bigger, is using technology to reach out, for example, in Indonesia, we reach out to islands where we usually cannot reach. And another way to use technology is for a small city like Hong Kong. There's no reason why a patient has to wait in a waiting room for hours. If we can, please try to figure out a way to notify the patient 20 minutes before the appointment so they can wait at home in comfort. Or when they arrive at the hospital, you can scan the ID card and they can print out the entire appointment of the day. It's being done in other hospitals. Scan my Hong Kong ID card. I know 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, where I need to go. And I think that would be a big leap, especially in Hong Kong. Waiting in the heat and the crowded space is really not the most comfortable.
Yes, in our line of work, we have, in Hong Kong, we have especially looked at using smart technology for people with elderly. And we have built actually Polytechnic University and the Housing Society, which you see the logo here, we have built a resource center showcasing the smart technology, especially for elderly people. And there will be a talk about 2 days later in the Congress, and you'll hear from them how they can use it. And, but I understand that it's an area still have a lot to be improved. And definitely Hong Kong is not the forerunner of this particular technology, but we are working on it, particularly, as I mentioned, Polytechnic University and the Housing Society.
Well, it's unfortunate Dr. Libby is not here because she will be able to speak a little bit more. But maybe I could explain a little bit, on the Hong Kong situation. Like 90% of our hospital healthcare is actually provided in the public sector by the 42 hospitals under the Hospital Authority. What we have done in terms of technology, basically, is that we've been able to establish a hospital-wide sort of electronic patient record system. So that any patient, any citizens in Hong Kong can access the healthcare at anywhere, anytime, provided they have an ID card. Yeah? And this system at the present moment is also linked up with the private sector. In the past few years, the Hong Kong government has invested to develop the electronic health record, which could be extended to private hospitals and private providers as well. And I think under the current Legislative Council, we just passed the law in relation to the setting up of the electronic health records. So this is a part which is actually the most important part in terms of the use of technology. And I believe in Hong Kong we are pretty advanced global-wise in terms of electronic patient record and electronic health record, ensuring continuity of care, accessibility of care as well. We are not so advanced in terms of today use of mobile apps, especially even wearables and all that integrated into the health system. Not yet at this stage, not even in the private hospitals. And this is something that I'd like to see, especially from the private sector instead of the public sector. Okay, any more questions? Well, we are actually, any more questions? No? Okay, maybe we have the last question because
I have some doubt about this user. Someone have mentioned about user. When you say user, you are referring to doctors, nurses. I think they are basically referring to as the stakeholder. But I quite like the idea of happy building. Happy building refer to all the occupiers inside. They also include the patients. I just want to know how do we, sometimes the user that you mentioned may not be the voice of the patient. How do we collect their information and what their requirement from? How do we do it?
Happy workplace, happy building.
Happy workplace. We do have to give the nurses and doctors credit for knowing what makes the patient happy. That's part of it. But like I've said, we have had town hall meetings and focus group. We cannot ask the entire community, but we can have smaller group hold in different sessions. But to be honest with you, a lot of it is really for PR. I know my client, they do it because they want to send the message out and say, we are listening to you. But from a patient standpoint, not a lot of the input are being implemented. We're still very focused on, I'm just stating fact, we're still very focused on taking care of the nurse and the doctors. From the US, especially the nurses. Aging nurses, we have a shortage. For us, happy nurse means happy patient. Mm-hmm. And we also have to build in, not just the patient, the family. Focus group is the patient and the family. So in our design, not ours in the US, our patient room specifically save space for the family because we have a shortage of nurses. So we have to rely on the family to also be there and take care of the patient, to relieve our aging supporter.
Okay. James, you want to say any more on that?
It's not, doesn't really address the question, I guess, but in buildings, the sort of buildings that we were talking about in our practice, anecdotally, we know that research organisations, especially say in Australia, which is, you know, right at the bottom of the world, competing for international talent across the health industry, not just research. Buildings play an enormous part in attracting good people. And so often part of the brief for buildings like the ones I showed you are to make those places extremely attractive, especially to younger generations of people who want to be part of a thriving work community. So anecdotally, the better the design, the better the more humanity that is applied to the design, the better people will be attracted and they will want to stay in that building as well.
Okay, it's 5:30, so I think we have to draw this session to its close. So thanks for everybody for the very active questions and discussion. And let's thank the panelists first. Yeah, and give them a clap. And Ellen, you will have the final say for the day. So thanks all the panelists. Yeah.
Well, please, before we go, I want to just thank you, all of you, for all this very variety of presentation. This is just the start of our Congress. I think you cover the most idea that we are coming to talk the next 3 days more deeply. Tomorrow we start with the city planning, urban planning, and later on we discuss also with in the evening with green building in the highest level in the world with Ken Young, you know very well. So there is a lot of challenges, and we explore more during these 3 days, and you will see. But I have a kind of statement, discussion about the standardization. I must say, as a researcher, as public health scientist, as architect, I hate standardization. It's completely wrong definition in our profession, because standardization kills the creativity. But I like very much the guideline. We should have a guideline. And through the guideline, we have explored the creativity. Because architecture is all about emotion and experience of people within the built environment. If you wanted to apply standardization, then you can see one of the hospitals we have in Germany, in Aachen Hospital. It's the most catastrophic result of standardization they have applied ever in the world, which the 79, 80s, and 85, which the government of the region lose the power because of that standardization of the hospital. So please, within the healthcare, we should not use standardization. So this is very important. And our experience in Australia, which is the most advanced country in the world in terms of healthcare design, is very close here. We should learn a lot from Australia. We have been there for many years. We have done many workshops with the government, with all government from Australia. We had our World Congress. We learned a lot. And the most creative hospital, Children's Hospital, which you show again today and tomorrow and next days, you can see they have received 4 or 5 Academy Awards and evaluated by our network like you. So we must be very humble in this situation, because Hong Kong is a very important city in the world. Hong Kong is the gateway for China. We should really use this opportunity and bring this knowledge from this very vibrant and very knowledgeable city, Hong Kong, to entire China. And we should not be affected by the standardization and this kind of discussion about the cost. It's not the cost, it's investment. It's completely wrong definition. So it's very important to discuss, very honest, but very humble, and we learn from each other and experience from this Congress and our colleague, and to share with the government, with decision maker, with other colleagues, to learn from each other. And this is our task here, to continue discussion and to share our knowledge and learn from each other. So we are very pleased for these days, for these colleagues that presented the latest ideas from the city of Hong Kong, what they are doing and how we can develop these days. And please, each of you, very friendly and meet each other and try to share the knowledge. And this is our main goal, how to share knowledge and how to learn from each other. So thank you very much for all your presentation.